Howdy folks, Big Ed Barnum here from Big Ed Barnum's Bossa Nova Barn. I gotta go adjust the frame for a second. Morning, Adjective. Just saying you've joined just in time for Big Ed Barnum's fading Bossa Nova Barn. I guess that song faded right when it needed to. Howdy folks, Big Ed Barnum here from Big Ed Barnum's Bubble Barn and Garden, Big Ed Barnum's Barnum Book Club, and Big Ed Barnum's Bossa Nova Barn, and Big Ed Barnum's Barbecue Boot Factory. That's right. You want a pair of boots with barbecue in it? You want to slide your feet into some barbecue? I got the boots for you. I have no idea what we're talking about. Hey, Randy Knickers. Thanks for the host there, Adjective Beaver. I'm already out of breath. What the hell is going on? I've actually lost 7 pounds this week through not drinking and intermittent fasting, but we'll get to that later. Yes. Watchmen, Chapter 4. Where we almost dodged misogyny, but not quite. It hit us right in the forehead. I don't know. I just, last week, when we left off, it was, we left off with, John, what's his last name? Osterman? John Osterman, is that his name? Anyway, we left Dr. Manhattan taking a crap on Mars. Reading Watchmen helps you lose weight because you're just sitting there thinking, holy shit, Alan Moore is just kind of an asshole, and you just sort of like sit there, keep thinking about it, and you're not eating. You're not going to the refrigerator. You're just sitting there thinking, Watchmen, a masterpiece of structure and, technical achievement from a writing standpoint. But hoo-wee! The guy's about as subtle as Cortez moving across someplace where Cortez went. Fountain drink. Rated R. So that's how we're going to start with just, That's how we're going to start. It's John Osterman taking a crap on Mars. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. So, how are you all today? Adjective, what the hops? Thanks for that, host. What's the hops? I always drop the S off what's the hops. Yes, you can lose weight now with our new Rage at Alan Moore program. Free of charge. I don't know how to get started today. Chapter 4 is basically the backstory of Dr. Manhattan, how he came to be Dr. Manhattan. There's also the bit at the end. I can't remember who writes the thing at the end, the meta story thing. Let me find out who that is really quick. It's not Wally Weaver, I don't think. I think it's a character we may not meet. Oh, that's under the hood. I'm still on last week's horse shit. I'll get it here. Professor Milton Glass's treatise, not really a treatise, just a diatribe. Dr. Manhattan, Superpowers and the Superpowers. Which is sort of, I think it's really just Alan Moore If there's a voice in Watchmen that is truly Alan Moore, I think it's pretty much Dr. Milton Glass's Alan Moore, where he talks about, thank God Dr. Manhattan's an American, because, had it not been for him, he's the deterrent to the nuclear holocaust. And, anyway, so Chapter 4 is largely Dr. Manhattan's origin story. It also goes into some of why he feels disconnected to people, and I guess the planet as a whole. Suddenly feel like there's music or something that I'm supposed to have underscoring all this. And it's... I think the one nice thing about Chapter 4 is it's really just a montage. I mean, the whole form is montage, really, but you know what I'm going at. It's a montage where Dr. Manhattan is on the moon, but he's reliving the experiences from about 4 different time periods in his life, including references to the future a little bit. He didn't go to medical school for 8 years so people could call him Mr. Manhattan. Hi, Amy. How's it going? Where was I? It's sort of... it's just a well-executed montage where we get Dr. Manhattan as he's first starting his career. We get a look at some of the work that he may have been doing had he not had his accident. We get a look back to when he was in his, I guess, late teens, when he's thinking of becoming a watchmaker like his father. And talk about impulsive people. His father comes in. Oh, we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. We don't need watches anymore. I'm going to destroy everything that you thought of about me and your childhood. I'm just going to throw it out there. Throw it out the window. And you're just going to have to start. John, you're just going to have to start all over again. Because watchmaking, ooh-wee. Even Einstein says, time's relative and all that kind of stuff. We don't need a watch. Well, Dad, it's just sort of like, you don't play a joke on Dr. Manhattan's dad because he's so literal-minded that my pants are on fire? I don't know what that is. Hi, Goldie. Morning, Goldie. The main blue man goes to Mars. But I don't know what to make of this chapter. There's a couple of things. I'm just going to babble. There's a couple of things that I do like about this chapter. Milton Glass's thing refers to something that I've long thought. He's talking about how, how could the Russians ever want to engage in a nuclear exchange? Not just because of, Dr. Manhattan would, likely, take down most of the missiles. There'd still be a lot of damage done. But why would there even be this mentality that the Soviets would have in the 80s? And I think it's still there. And he talks about the price that the Soviets paid, that the Russians paid during the Second World War, and how, had they not paid that price, and we're talking about losing, I can't remember what the Russian count for casualties, for Russian dead in the Second World War is, but I think it's around 20 million people. That's a lot. We'll look it up here. But had it not been for that price of admission, the Allies, and by that I mean largely the Americans and the British, would not have gotten a foothold in Europe. And the Second World War would have had likely a very odd, very different outcome. There's a lot of people that will say things, and it's all hubris. It's like, if it wasn't for us, you guys would be speaking German. Well, if it wasn't for the Russians going toe-to-toe with the Germans on the Eastern Front, the Allies, Anzio, D-Day, the North African campaign, a lot of that stuff would have turned out very, very differently. And what Dr. Milton Glass is saying is that history has kind of forgotten that price that Russia paid and has overplayed the contribution that, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to downplay the American, the British, and the Allied contributions here. I'm just saying, Milton Glass is saying that people tend to forget what the Russians did in the Second World War, largely because after the Second World War, they're sort of becoming our, they're the biggest guy in the ring that we have to go boxing against. That is, they're becoming our enemies. So, one of the things you always do is you sort of, you don't want to give them credit for something they may have done. You want to, downplay, dehumanize the enemy a little bit. And I think the Russian mentality is like, that's not going to happen again. We're not, there's a quote I should have underlined. Anyway, chat's going on. I'm babbling. I'm just going to check on chat. As a follow-up to what you just said, as revered that Watchmen is, at this point in the book, do you think Watchmen is still relevant to today, or is it too dated? One of the things here. So here's one of the things, this might be talking too much spoiler speak, but I think the one thing that the movie gets right that the book shies away from is Alan Moore is painting this whole picture of what does it mean to live in the nuclear age? What is the price that we're likely going to pay? What are some of the horrors that could happen? And the big threat that's coming at later in the story, it's a big spider, if I recall correctly. And in the movie, it really is a nuclear exchange. I say that, haven't read the book in 25 years, and I don't recall much of the movie, but I think Alan Moore is trying to paint this big picture of like, this is what we're living with. But in the end, the big threat is something else. So I think, to answer your question, what's the hops? I think it's still relevant today when it comes to looking at the motivations and the perspective of two of the big superpowers on the planet. I guess the two superpowers on the planet, the U.S. and the Soviet Union, both 60s through the 80s, and even now. Because the Soviets, under Putin especially, there's things that they want to do. And they, I need to close chat over here, because every time I'm in the middle of something, I see something, boop, boop, boop. I don't know. The giant spider is really cartoony. It really is. And I think that might be the biggest failure of the book. So here's another thing that I was thinking of. Alan Moore said he wrote Watchmen to be unfilmable, and I've had a few comments about that. I think one of the ways you make something unfilmable is to make it too goddamn cartoony at the end that nobody wants to make it that way, which is, I think, Zack Snyder, love him or hate him, or whether you're lukewarm about him. And I'm not saying it was Zack Snyder that changed the ending of the movie, or if it was the writers, or it was a combination of the two. But I think, I think it's certainly less filmable when it's when the overarching threat becomes a little cartoony. Thanks, J. Mitch, for joining, and thanks for the host. You've joined me just in time to start half-babbling, and by half-babbling, I mean I start to say something in babble speak, and then I get distracted, and then I don't know if I circle back and conclude a thought. But I think what Watchmen does is, I think it's certainly, especially the Milton Glass thing, and here's, I realize I just did what I said I shouldn't be doing, which is babbling halfway and then going off on a tangent. I think the best parts of Watchmen have nothing to do with what's happening in the comic panels. I think it's all the extra material at the end of each chapter, the Hollis Mason autobiography. Even though I don't like the voice that Milton Glass is writing in, I think the meat of the novel, the meaning of the novel, the stuff that will stick with you and the stuff that is relevant is the stuff that's happening in that heavily text-based part of Watchmen. And I would almost, I mean, you know, going through the book now, seeing the movie and things like that, I would like to do an experiment where you take, I don't know, 10 readers, and you give 5 of them the graphic novel part of the book without that supplemental material, and then you give another 5 readers just the supplemental material and see what they arrive at in terms of their thoughts on the story. And I don't know, it might not make a lot of sense from a storytelling standpoint, but I think the meat and the relevant stuff in Watchmen is that stuff that's coming at the end of the chapter that, frankly, a lot of people probably don't read. They're like, oh, words. I'm not going to read this. What the hops? You and I are in agreement generally. So next week you're just going to host the whole book club thing. I'm going to take a week off. I'm kidding. But yeah, I think you know, it's the text, and I don't quite know the term to put on it. The meta story, the primary sources. Of course, some of those are largely secondary sources. So yeah, I think that's the thing that I'm thankful of for Chapter 4 is you know, you don't have the Black Freighter or Pirate Jenny or any of that pirate thing going on. Just a couple things that I was going to go through. Oh, we'll do this. We'll switch over here to. Do I want this one? I think I want this one. It's a little tighter. Put this up here in the corner. So yeah, Chapter 4. Well, let's get through Hollis Mason's last bit. So Chapter 4. We're going to skip through this fairly quickly because it's John. Is it Osterman? I keep thinking of the not Osterman. Is it the Osterman Weekend? There's a really awful movie. I think it's John Osterman. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's John Osterman. Excuse me. John's on Mars, going through his past, his relationships with women, which we already know in Alan Moore's world, women can't be pleased. They're always getting in the way of your work. They're just, you know, they're just trouble. They're just problems. That's not me speaking. That's Alan Moore speaking. So we've gone through some of this. Here's, you know, John, watchmaker, putting together a watch. I'm a big fan of watches. I've yet to adopt an Apple Watch. I've been wearing this one for about 15 years. Watches are complex pieces of equipment. If you've never seen the parts inside a watch, this little illustration here of all these watch pieces actually doesn't do it justice when you pull open something like a chronograph, especially one that's self-winding. Anyway, so we have him throwing this stuff. My profession is a thing of the past. Instead, my son must have a future. It's like, I don't know who said it. Alan Moore, he's not subtle, and neither is John's dad. So we go from there. There's just, he's just met one of his co-workers who's giving him a tour of the place. Gee, that must have been something. You know, I heard he argued with his wife. He's talking about Einstein. He argued with his wife, huh? A guy like that, a genius. Even he couldn't figure women. Thanks, Alan. Just, you know, thought we might get away from that a little bit. Let's see. So, couple things, just circling back. I think chapter 4 is pretty much, you know, I don't want to use the term masterpiece, but I think it's a pretty masterful use of montage and jumping back and forth through about 3, maybe 4 different points in time to tell a story and to give you a look into someone's point of view. I will give Alan Moore that. The accident, and John is torn into pieces, evaporated, if you will, and then over the course of time, he learns to put the pieces back together. And I don't know. There's no Humpty Dumpty thing going on here. There's no way Humpty Dumpty could come into this in any way. We're going to speed through this. So Wally Weaver gets cancer. There's the whole John Osterman dating a 16-year-old as a 30-year-old man. But, you know, Alan Moore. Anyway. I feel like, yeah, there's one of the things that will become important is Dr. Manhattan is at an event. I think it's a charity event in which there's a lot of masked vigilantes. And he says that only the youngest, called Ozymandias, seems interesting. That will be a little bit important a little later on. The fact that he finds him interesting. And we find Dr. Manhattan apparently blowing the heads off of crime bosses, shaking Kennedy's hand, going to Vietnam, helping the American cause and the American way of life, but for whatever reason he decides maybe not to stop the assassination of Kennedy. Yeah. So, supposed to be a complex character, but, you know, I don't know. Maybe he's just a coward. I don't know. I don't want to drop that on him. So, yeah, just sort of, I feel like there's not a lot of place to go with Chapter 4. It's largely just an origin story for Dr. Manhattan. There's some expository stuff where you learn stuff about the other characters, but it's really just Dr. Manhattan's show. And, you know, we haven't seen a lot of Ozymandias so far. He was at Eddie Blake, the funeral for the comedian. He was referenced a couple of times. This is really the, other than the funeral, this is the first scene, I think, where we've really seen Ozymandias, who is a little weird, incredibly wealthy. So, you know, like all wealthy people, he creates a refuge in Antarctica and starts genetically manipulating animals. Because, you know, that's what people do. You know, if I was incredibly wealthy, I wouldn't create a fortress of solitude in Antarctica, and I wouldn't start crossbreeding. I wouldn't start genetically engineering new animals. I would pay my friends to go play tennis with me and then have brunch. That's what I would do if I was incredibly wealthy, and probably take selfies all day, and then probably go have a steak dinner, and then have my personal trainer yell at me for having drank a mimosa at brunch, and then eating a full 12-ounce porterhouse steak and mashed potatoes. Hold the butter, though. You know, got to be reasonable. That's what I would do if I was filthy rich. And drink my fountain drinks out of glass. That's real good. I lost a filling. And it's fine. It's not painful or anything. But every now and then, there's a little sensitivity there. I'm getting it fixed. I just have to wait like a couple weeks. Because, you know. I just like sticking my tongue where my filling came out. So we have Dr. Manhattan. We have people turning, retiring. Night Owl, Laurie, Ozymandias retires and reveals his public identity. So there's a lot of stuff in here that is stuff that we know, but it's all being relived through the point of view of Dr. Manhattan. And I think that's important for what is to come, because, you know, without spoiling it, Dr. Manhattan really is the central character to the whole thing, at least at this point. You know, it's when the graphic novel starts, you think that everything's going to hinge on Rorschach to an extent, because he's the one who's trying to investigate who killed the comedian. He's the one who's trying to warn all the other Watchmen. He's the one who is monitoring who's coming and going to things like the funeral and whatnot. So you think it's going to hinge on him, and you know, a lot of it does. But really, what's going on and what's to come is really going to hinge on Dr. Manhattan. And I don't think that's a spoiler, because you wouldn't have Chapter 4 the way it is if he wasn't important in some way. And then we're coming to the end. Of course, you know, I can't think of Veidt is his last name. I can't think of Ozymandias' first name. You know, he builds his Fortress of Solitude on Antarctica. Dr. Manhattan builds his on Mars. You know, which, you know, you should do if you can. It's like nobody owns it. You know, squatters' rights. You know, just build your Fortress of Solitude, you know, where nobody else can come stake a claim. And then we have Dr. Manhattan, Superpowers and the Superpowers. And it is, like I said, I think this is, even though it's in Alan Moore's voice, I think, even though the tone is slightly annoying, I think this piece here is pretty important to everything that has happened in the story, everything that's going to happen in the story. And I think it's still a little relevant. I think it's still pretty relevant in terms of explaining the Russian point of view from the 60s, 80s, early 90s. Things, of course, changed in the 90s, but I think that underlying, I almost said pathology, that underlying perspective is still there. And there is a quote here somewhere. I'm not going to spend too much time trying to think it. This is when I need Cole, so I could look for something and he could just babble on. The presence of a deterrent such as Dr. Manhattan has doubtless curbed Soviet adventurism, as there have been numerous occasions when the USSR has had to step down over some issue rather than risk escalation into a war it certainly could not win. Often those have been humiliating, and perhaps foster the illusion that the Soviets will suffer such indignities endlessly. This is a misconception, for there is indeed another option available, that is mutually assured destruction. And it is Dr. Milton Glass's point of view that it's not as crazy as it sounds when you have suffered the way the Soviets have, in his mind. I don't go that far, but I do think one of the things that people do, and you will hear this, well, if I were you, I would do this. And it's easy to play that game, but you are not the person that you are saying, if I were you, I would do this. because if you were them, you would have the same motivations, impulses, pathologies, compulsions, prejudices, whatever. If I were you means, it sounds, I don't know, it's flip. I'm just being, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying the person on the other side of the table is not you and is not motivated by the same thing as you. So don't make assumptions about what they will or will not do. You can game what they may or may not do. You can plan and have contingency plans for what they may or may not do, but you don't know what they're going to do. That's all I'm saying. It's been quiet in chat for a minute. For a long, good minute. For 6 minutes. I better go see if I'm streaming. I think I'm still streaming. For better or worse, I think I'm still streaming. So those are just some random thoughts on. Oh yeah, I was going through Instagram earlier. So just some random thoughts on the end text of Dr. Milton Glass's Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan, superpowers and the superpowers. I just I want to see the Watchmen as the panel on What's My Line, to see what their line of questioning would be when, that's a dumb joke. I'm not even going to finish saying what I was saying. So that's sort of where we are. I don't know where to go with this, so I don't know if I should change gears here for a second. Yeah, I'll do that. As you know, at a recent estate sale, this is going back a couple months, I purchased the journals of a masked vigilante that was active in Portland, late 80s, up through the late 90s. Occasionally he would make appearances in the early 2000s, but then just sort of retired, disappeared. But he kept journals, much like Rorschach, which is one of the reasons I thought. And this is half the journals he kept. I've yet to track down the other half. And they make for pretty compelling reading. And, I didn't intend this to become a segment on the book club. But as I read through these, I find things that are pretty compelling entries into what is going through the mind of a masked vigilante. So I'm just going to read this one. And, I don't know if he sounded like Rorschach or not. Or Horseshack. I don't know if he sounded like Rorschach or Horseshack. And I'm only going to do one of those impressions. So this is Tin Horn's Journal, October 12, 1996. Must-see TV? Hardly. It's the only thing people are going to talk about Friday morning, so you don't have to see it to know exactly what's going on with Ross or Rachel or Kramer, because Donna's not going to shut up about it during the morning meeting. Then Gary doesn't come into the office until around 10 o'clock, so we got to hear it all again. Must-see TV? More like Donna won't shut up about TV. That's the journal entry there. I think Tin Horn, watched a lot of TV, because that's the second time Friends has been referenced in his journals. Well, that segment took a whole lot less time than I thought it would. Horseshack. Half horse, half shack, all badass. So yeah, The Watchmen, Chapter 4. I'm trying to think of what else I have going on. One of the things I need to do, Tin Horn is starting to sound like he needed a hug. There was actually, I'll look for, I don't think it's in this one. Tin Horn went to, you've heard this phrase, I think there's two meanings of the word, cuddle party. But I'll look for it. There was an entry where he went to, he found a cuddle cuddle surrogate or a hug surrogate. He actually found a therapist who was into hug therapy, and he went to them. It's in one of these. I will look for it. I'll look for that next week. Let me just write that down really quick in my notepad. And I'm going to write it down in real time, not some sort of pseudo theatrical live streaming time. I'm actually literally going to write it. Tin horn, apostrophe, tin horns, hug therapy entries. Because I think there was more than one. I think if you go to hug therapy, I think they encourage you to journal after each session, and he was already journaling. So, you know, if you're asked to journal and you're already a journal, you know. Have you read Dora the Explorer Space Investigation? I haven't. And I do like meat. And there we go. It's funny. There's something that happens occasionally that Cole thinks we get $1,000 when it happens. Which, if Cole were here and when you see it, you know it. Let's see. I actually think that's going to wrap it up. I think this is the fastest we've done a chapter. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Normally we talk a little bit about the New York Times book review. Not a lot going on in that today that I wanted to talk about. The morning news tournament of books hasn't quite heated up yet. I'll talk about more of that. I still need to fill out my brackets for that. I don't know if folks are interested in that, but we will dive into that a little more. Oh, one of the things I need to do, we were going to be doing 12 episodes for the book club for Watchmen, and there are 2 weekends in April, which is right about the time we would be wrapping up, that I'm going to be out of town. So I'm going to have to figure out, are we just going to double up a couple of chapters? Let me actually go. I am unavailable April 14 and April 21, which according to the calendar, those are the last 2 book club meetings where we're going to be talking about Watchmen. So I think what I'm going to do, and I will... Don't get your calendars out. I'll make this update later. I think on March 31 we will do chapter 9 and 10, and then on April 7 we will do 11 and 12, and then we will just wrap up 2 weeks earlier than we should have, because I have to take 2 weeks off. I will be in Los Angeles for a friend's 50th birthday party and a 24-hour sci-fi movie festival that I think this is the 19th. This is the 19th year that we've been doing it in LA, and previous to that we did it I think about 10 years. We used to go to the there's a sci-fi 24-hour sci-fi marathon in Boston. When I was living in New York, I had a bunch of friends in Boston. There was this 24-hour sci-fi festival that we would go to. Over the course of time, a lot of those folks moved to LA. A lot of us are just on the West Coast. And we would still... There was like a 2-year period where we all flew back to Boston to do this, go to this sci-fi movie marathon. And then we all just started looking at the cost of, flying a dozen people and staying in hotels and car rentals or, whatever. And then we just sort of decided that, we could host this thing locally and just spend way less money, and what we do spend, get more bang for the buck. So It's called BitFest, which is short for Boston is Too Far Festival. Boston is Too Far Est. You can try to look it up, but it's a slightly private affair, I must say. So that's not that you care, but yeah, I'll be in LA the 14th, a little over a week, celebrating someone's birthday and then going to a 24-hour thing. I might try to stream something while I'm there, but I don't know. It's yeah, it's always one of those things of, you know, when you're on the road, how much do you want to pack up to stream? And the what we do, you know, we're using this iPad, and today I just have the single camera over there, and this. It's not that big of a deal to travel with that stuff. But then there's, you know, 3 Ethernet cables and a little tiny router, and, you know, a little tiny USB hub that's, you know, running power to everything. It sort of becomes like one of those, oh, and you know, can I scrounge some tripods? You know, all that kind of stuff. I think you folks know what I'm talking about when it comes to traveling and streaming. And it's just so much easier to just say, you know what, I'm just gonna not do it, but I will see. I think I'm going to the Magic Castle while I'm there this time. I got a hookup. I just have to take some real pants, because at the Magic Castle you can't wear jeans, because bad things happen to denim at the Magic Castle. Can keep it simple and try using the Mixer Create app. I'm not sure how to go about restreaming from mobile though. I think if I did the mobile, and Cole and I farted around with the Mixer Create app once, because I'm not sure you recall, on one of the charity streams, we were trying to make breakfast in here, and like a couple of idiots, we plugged a toaster into the wall, which blew the circuit, and the Wi-Fi router, the router that we were using, we slung a long cable off, was in the house. It still had power. It's just everything out here didn't have power. So I think I fired up the Mixer Create app, maybe on the iPad here, so that we could just go live really quick and say, hey, we're rebooting some stuff. We'll be back on in a minute. So yeah, I've used the Mixer Create app in a pinch. And I think, you know, if I'm trying to think if I'm going to be any place in LA that would be worth just doing, you know, maybe some quick 5-10 minute streams through the course of, you know, maybe a day or so. Because usually when I go to LA, I'm staying with a friend, and there's no real hard set plan or schedule. It's just sort of like, we get up, what games do you want to play today? Where would you like to eat today? Oh, let's do this, let's do that. So there will probably be some gaming and whatnot. I might try and set a little camera up for just some board gaming. And I think the phone's over there. I want to go look at something. I just need to make sure I'm not sharing my desktop here for a second. I wanted to look at the games that we were going to be playing while I'm there. And it looks like the short list of games is going to be Anachrony, Rising Sun, Glory to Rome, Gaia Project, and Brass Birmingham. Let me copy this. I know all of these games except Anachrony. I don't know that one. I'm going to go look these up real quick. I'm going to go look these up, and this is what we're just going to, it's suddenly Game Club, which actually might be a better club. Let me switch over here. Let me just make sure I'm still not sharing anything that shouldn't be shared. Oh, I know. I'll do the unboxing of the thing that didn't arrive the other day. in time for us to... there was a thing we were going to unbox. It's here. Oh, I already opened it, though. Anachrony board game. How will you shape the future? Well, I'll take up some mass as I move around the planet. I'll displace some of the atmosphere as I move around. And, well, you know, I might go buy a hamburger. That's how I'm going to shape the future. David Terzi with Victor Peter and Richard Amon. I have no idea who these game designers are. Let's see. How will you shape the future? Command mighty exosuits, traverse the time rifts, and lead your path through a cataclysmic future in this epic board game for 1 to 4 players. You know, I've actually been thinking of getting a game for doing some solo play on a stream. Because if you're into board gaming or anything like that, you know how hard it is. To get people to commit to a schedule. Even, you know, once a month we're going to play board games. There's always things get in the way. So I've been thinking of actually, you know, one of the things about doing is just having a stream where I just play something solo. And if I were not 15 sessions deep into a Gloomhaven campaign, I would play Gloomhaven solo. I've actually thought about buying a second copy, but it's kind of a pricey proposition to do that, just to play a solo game. There's also Mage Knight, which I'm a big fan of, but once you've played Gloomhaven, there's some stuff. Mage Knight might be a good game to do some solo play. But anyway, Anachrony looks like it supports solo play. It's a competitive Euro-style strategy game set in a post-apocalyptic world, rebuilt along 4 different ideological paths. I don't know why paths is capitalized. Gloomhaven. Yeah, adjective. I love it. For me, it's 90% of what you want from a role-playing game, with some legacy elements, character development through experience, and then the whole tactical side of it, the city events, the road events. Yeah, I like it a lot. I can't wait for the computer version to come out, which I think is going to be a straight port of the game. But it might initially be just a solo game, which is fine. You know, it's Isaac Childress. Is that his name? I hope he's made enough money off of the first 2 print runs. Well, not print runs. The first 2. I think they're in the 4th printing now. I hope he's making enough money that he's paying the bills, paying the people that he's working for, and also funneling some of that into development of what's coming next. But I like it. Actually, Beaver, I'll send you an invite to our... I don't know if you use Slack. Actually, I was going to send you an invitation to our Slack channel. Is that what you call it? Slack, whatever. Slack project where we've been tracking. But I realized we've moved the tracking of our campaign largely away from Slack. I'd be interested in talking to you. Actually, adjective. We should just do a co-stream where we just talk about Gloomhaven some night soon. And I don't know if you own a physical copy, but I could pull things out and talk about them and why I like the game, and we could just do a co-stream. I haven't done a co-stream in like 4 months. I'd like to do that. We'll talk amongst ourselves offline. But Gloomhaven, Mage Knight, those are 2 things that I've been thinking of doing solo. Another thing I've been thinking of doing solo, and I don't have the full thing out here, and I don't know why these have been sitting out here so long, is the Arkham Horror living card game from Fantasy Flight Games. I've got a bunch of that stuff, and I believe that supports solo solo play as well. Adjective. I think you can get it on Amazon right now, probably for $99, at the most $129. That's a lot of money for a game. We have played 15 sessions, and there are many, many games that I have spent $35, $45, or $50 on that I've played once, and that game has been sitting on the shelf. So in terms of play value, Gloomhaven, it's worth. You're going to get your. I think, especially if you have a couple people around you who are local to you that want to play, it doesn't take long to get your value out of that game, and then still want to keep playing it. Yeah, I think so. Adjective. Just no spoilers here. I think the campaign book has 98 discrete scenarios. I think a normal campaign playthrough, I think you could probably do it and roughly play 2/3 of those. There's also a mechanic for generating side scenarios. If you want to do something that's not part of the campaign, but you've got people around, you're like, hey, let's play this game. I think there's definitely, actually, we've done a session a month, plus a couple here and there. We've done 15 sessions since last March. So we've been playing it once a month for a year, roughly. And we're playing it very soon. Actually, I know there are text messages going on this morning about playing Gloomhaven. I think, especially if you have 2 or 3 people who are going to split the cost with you. I know that gets weird in terms of who really owns the game, but yeah, I think it's worth it. I should change this now from Barnham Book Club number 7, February 24, Watchmen chapter 4, to Barnham Game Club number 1, February 24, jabbering about games. Just checking in with the chat. So Anachrony, I still don't know anything about it. It looks a little sprawling, which I have mixed feelings about big sprawling games. Especially, I love Kickstarter. I'm not the biggest fan of games that are put on Kickstarter that are these huge sprawling affairs where you need a forensic accountant to track the stretch goals and where you get the best bang for your dollar without just going to the bottom tier. Oh yeah, $4.99, that gets you everything you see here. Because sometimes I wonder, number one, is the game any good? And number two, am I going to be sick? Can I spend $40 for the base game and get just as much enjoyment and not have to store all this other shit? So this one, I do have some concerns about this game, that it is, junked up. That's a phrase that somebody once used to me. We were creating this clown bit, and I know that's a loaded phrase right there. And the person who was leading the workshop says, this is the part where we junk everything up. We're just, we're adding everything to this to see what it is and what it isn't. This looks junked up to me, which is fine, but then somebody didn't go through and say, this is really the core game. This is what really people need. This other stuff is just an opportunity to upsell everybody on stuff they don't need. Yeah, that's big and sprawling can get very tiring. There's a lot of big sprawling games that I knew I was just going to love. And I played once and then realized this is too fiddly. I don't want to do this. I don't want to track all this random stuff. And then Maniac Gear, it's hard to bring people into the hobby, and that doesn't even have to be a motivation for you. But if somebody says, "Hey, let's play a game," and you pull out Twilight Imperium, or "Hey, I keep hearing about board games and I kind of want to try some. Can you walk me through something?" And you pull out. I'm just going to beat up Twilight Imperium. You pull Twilight Imperium out. It's. You might as well just stab them in the gut. Literally, you should just when given the option of introducing someone to board gaming, and your options are, well, Twilight Imperium, or I have this dull knife that's going to cut up their innards. You should just stab them. Just do them a favor. Just stab them. Tonight on K2 News, local streamer encourages youngsters to stab people. So yeah, this does look a little junky. So there's engaging science fiction world with a vivid backstory. Do I care? I don't know. There's a lot of things with a vivid backstory that's just inconsequential to the gameplay. Worker placement and resource management with a time-traveling twist. Can't you just tell me what the twist is? Worker placement, that's a game mechanic. Resource management, that's a game mechanic. Just tell me what your time-traveling twist is in terms of a mechanic. I don't want to play this game! Huge replayability thanks to variable player powers and countless ways to victory. This just means there's all kinds of different characters, all kinds of different victory conditions, and probably all kinds of a third thing that when you mix them all together are just 3 variables giving you a ton of different game options. Doesn't time traveling twist. Undo. As long as you're on a linear, what should be immutable path, and you're not subscribing to the multi-world theory where you're just jumping from one timeline to another. Anyway, just great potential for player interaction and ways for temporary cooperation. If that's not straddling the fence, here, where do I have to go to get that up there? Yeah. Okay, game mechanisms. A 2-tiered worker placement system. Okay, that's fine. I kind of like this mechanic of you charge or, put a piece inside the exosuit. I also like 55 millimeter miniatures. I grew up on 15 millimeter and 25 millimeter scale. So it's nice to have 55 millimeter so that somebody can see how crappy I paint. We're also coming up on the 1 hour 3 minute mark. If we hit that magic 1 hour 15 and the audio drops, just let me know. We'll restart. So these little things, I saw about 10 of them across the middle of the board. I don't know what those are. Possibly it tells me. Resource management through time. The world, which is usually the day of purgation. Memories of the day the world met its fate are now mostly lost to the centuries. I don't know. It's this sort of, I don't know. I don't need a vivid backstory to play a game. In fact, if my knowledge of the backstory is one of those things that's going to enhance my enjoyment of the game, I don't know. I'll go read a book. Yes. When you're focusing on the standard winning conditions and then someone else suddenly wins because of obscure side game aspect, or the fact that they're further away than you want to lean forward and read their victory conditions upside down. I've lost games that way because I just sort of like leaning forward and reading something upside down. I don't want to do that. The paths, are these links? These are links. The path of harmony. The path of dominance. Here, let me scroll up. The path of progress and the path of salvation. I'm less inclined. I'm not as psyched to play this. Anachrony. How would you shape the future? I don't know if this will play.
The day of purgation. The day the old world met its fate, and a new era has dawned. 3 centuries have passed, and new Earth has been rebuilt along the paths of harmony, dominance, progress, and salvation. Today, we have gathered at the world's capital to commemorate the Day of Purgation by raising monuments to strengthen the world's unity. Built from the mysterious material left in the wake of the purgation, we were shocked to realize
Can you guys hear that?
the monuments are capable of opening wormholes, connecting different points in time. By harnessing its power, resources from our own future can be transported to our disposal today. But such wormholes can also transfer energy, even the blast wave of an asteroid impact. The grim message from our own future is clear. The Day of Purgation is not only an event of our past. An asteroid is heading relentlessly towards Earth.
Sorry.
And a catastrophic impact is looming on the horizon. This time, it is up to us if we face a fatal cataclysm or a new beginning.
Face the fatal cataclysm of playing this game. Yeah. Yeah. I think I got to tell my friend that this one is on the bottom of the list. Brass Birmingham? I don't know if you guys have seen this game. Well, there's the shut up and sit down. You know, I've never seen the Super Mario Brothers movie. Is that the one with Bob Hoskins and another guy that I've forgotten who it is? All right, I don't want to go on Kickstarter here. Hang on a second. I got a Brass Deluxe Edition. Let's just see if they have a website. I don't want to go through the Kickstarter stuff. Dice Throne. What's awesome, Randy Knickers? Dice Throne? I have a feeling you're lying to me. Brass Lancashire and Brass Birmingham. I don't remember which one my friend wants. My friend has both of them, I think. But these two look pretty. I was hoping to find something more about gameplay and what these really are, as opposed to just being able to order them. One of the highest rated, 30 highest rated board games on Board Game Geek. But, and I think I have a copy of this in an unopened box somewhere. But I think Birmingham is the one we're going to be playing. In August. These photos are just sort of not very compelling. So, we're reaching 1:15, which is where things usually go south audio-wise. So I think that's going to be where we call this edition of Book Club. And I know I said I was going to open this thing. I think I'm going to set this thing up and do that on Thursday nights. Stream with Cole. And blow his mind. Something like that. All right, folks. I will put up some links to everything that we talked about randomly today on the Discord site. There's a link somewhere. Anyway, I want to thank that one black guy, Adjective Beaver, Goldie, What's the Hops? I think J. Mitch was in here briefly. Maniac Gear, Randy Knickers. Who am I forgetting? Yeah, J. Mitch was here. Was J-Man for Life in here? I don't know. But anyway, thank you all very much. Thank you all very much for joining. I appreciate it. And I will see you very soon. I'm Big Ed Barnham. Thank you very much.